Okay, so this meeting is being recorded. We're going to call the Governor's UAS Council meeting on September 23rd to order. First thing I will do is do the roll call. Butch Heasby.
Present.
Dan Olson.
Present.
JD. Not here. Dustin Temple. Gordy Kahn.
I'm here.
James Strait.
Here.
Jason Smith. Jen Fowler.
I'm here.
All right, there she is. And Mike Buselman.
Yes, Mike is here.
Paul Sapaniak.
I'm here.
Steve White.
Here.
Wes Err. Not here. Still fighting fires, probably. Joe Froelich. And don't have a Joe. And myself. Okay. So I was going to ask Joe had made a couple notes in our documents, and I was going to ask him some things, but we'll carry on without him. All right. So we're going to follow the same standing agenda from last week. We're going to review the draft recommendation for the procurement process. Last week's meeting, we did not have very many members, so we basically treated it as a working group session, and reviewed some of the documents, and then the centralized oversight plan, which we'll get into again here today and see how far we get. So I'm going to share the screen on that document. Just give me one moment. I had to reboot my machine before the meeting because my Zoom was getting hung up. So all the documents I had open and ready got closed. There we go. All right, so share that one. All right, folks should be able to see the screen on the procurement policy draft.
Yep, we see it.
All right, just looking at this other note I didn't see before. When I was looking at it in Teams, some of these notes didn't show up the same way. All right, so the changes I made based on our meeting discussion last time to the document was in this section for the data was data owned by the state of Montana is subject to 14M. Oh, Shane's there, so it must be Wes and Shane have shown up. All right, is subject to 215.114 MCA, is also subject to data security laws in MCA 217.534, along with other applicable federal and state security and privacy laws. That was based on a note comment that Joe had made. Does that seem to address the concerns we had? Basically just streamlined it down a bit from the last version so that we didn't get into who owns the data, what the contract language is. It's just data owned by the state is subject to this. If a contract says that data is owned by somebody else, then obviously this doesn't apply in the same way.
Right. Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Craig. I'm joining late here. Sorry, everyone. Joe Froelich.
Hey, Joe.
Hi, Craig.
All right, so I'm going to go mark the agenda that Joe and I think Wes has shown up.
Yeah, this is Shane, and probably not Wes. He's here, but we're configuring this aircraft to take off here in the next 40 minutes. So if you have any questions, ask me for Wes. Otherwise, he's kind of busy.
All right. Nope, that's fine. When he's able to review documents to give some input, that'd be great. The other change on the cost benefit analysis section, we had discussed as a group, and so I want to, well, let me back up here a second now that Joe Froelich has joined. Just for all those that weren't in attendance last week, I know there was a number of conflicts folks had. Joe Froelich is the representative from SITSD. To recap, the governor's office realized that the audit had recommended SITSD involvement also. So they reached out, and Joe was the lucky winner from the SITSD lottery to be part of this council. And so Joe is, Joe, just remind everyone of your role with SITSD, if you would, please.
Yeah, thanks, Cray. So my role, I am the Policy and Risk Management Bureau Chief for State Information Technology Services Bureau, which is underneath the Department of Administration.
All right, and welcome again, Joe. I won't go through everyone else on the council again. We did some of them last week. Joe can obviously grab the list off the governor's webpage to see the other members of the council if there's any questions. Joe's been around the state for a number of years, so he's probably familiar with most of the people on the call. And the non-state folks were here last week, so we got them covered. All right, so getting back into section B, one of the discussions we had last week, for those that weren't here, is that we talked about possibly changing the cost benefit analysis to a $5,000 limit instead of the governor's office recommended $1,000 limit, so it lines out with state procurement policy. And the other item was to consider modifying the recommendation for cost benefit analysis to apply to a UAS program within an agency, and letting each purchase as underneath that program be analyzed under the umbrella of the program's cost benefit analysis, and that it may be too in the weeds and inconsistent with other state procurement operations to require a cost benefit for every piece of equipment that happens underneath that program, but it should fold under that. I haven't reviewed that with the intent of the governor's office yet, but that was some of the discussions we had that may make more sense. Any other thoughts and comments on that, especially from the other members who weren't present at that time? I know that's a little different concept than we started with.
Do you have any thoughts of what constitutes a program? Or is it just, I guess, I don't know if I would ever do a whole program.
I think for me, initially, my response would be, if you're buying a UAS device or a service, then that's
your program.
And you don't have a program, anyone dedicated to this, it's your first time, then that's what you're doing. We do cover under here, we do say for new UAS programs or significant.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Requiring a full competitive procurement process, a full business case analysis is recommended. So if you're just starting out, there should be something done to analyze. Should we be buying a device? Should we just be hiring someone to do this? Should we be partnering with another agency who already has one? And we can flesh that out more with more wording if you think is appropriate.
I think that makes sense. I like the significant purchase down below. So.
Is there going to be any dispute, Gray, on what a program is? I mean, I'm kind of on the outside looking into the state government, and maybe the state government, you know, this is a pretty common word. I was trying to figure out, reverse engineer what I thought it meant, but is there any, I mean, it says that in accordance with the executive order, and that the program, you know, that this is all about establishing a program, but I didn't know if is there any value in adding a definition so everybody that's going to have to employ this, they're going to know what that means? I mean, you guys all probably know what it means, but it was kind of a new word for me.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good question. I don't think we all know what it means. We're going to have different definitions. I threw in program for lack of a better term, or operations. I think we probably, I'm just looking on this policy draft. I don't see in the template a section for definitions, and usually there is. So
Yeah.
we should do something on that. And then we can define UAS program of what we think it would be.
Yeah, because I think for me, a program would be that it's actually, going to be a long-term thing that isn't just a one-time deal. It's that you're creating something that's going to continue to grow or exist, maybe.
Yeah.
But that was a good thought of if it's already, you're already doing it, that then the program exists and that's what it's all about. Then you treat it differently. I think that's really good.
Well, I think the intention we had discussed then is you already done a cost benefit analysis, and let's
Yeah.
say that you have 2 drones and what you're doing is adding a third, then all you really need to do is reanalyze, is purchasing a third one the best decision for the organization, or should we be outsourcing for this particular project? And if your analysis is nope, it still makes sense to continue to add to the program, then you're set to continue to move
Yeah.
forward.
Well, that's good. I like that.
So any thoughts on what we should put as a U.S. program definition?
I mean, it's if you think it's needed. I mean, you sure wouldn't want to get into a situation where there was confusion right out of the chute.
Right. Well, it certainly can't hurt.
Right.
So could you start simple where it's the procurement of UAS systems or services?
For use by the agency.
Or yeah.
I mean,
Procurement and management.
yes.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Um, or something like that.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that's great.
All right, so I'll look up something to add a definition section, and then we can add to it anything else that we feel maybe vague to clarify for folks.
And you probably could, if you don't want to add a definitions thing, you'd probably just put that language there instead of the word program, or with the word program in the sentence.
You know what you could do also maybe is just have a little footnote number there, and then just that would direct them to the bottom of the page where number 1 is the definition of it.
Yeah, let me take a look, because generally a policy template for the state has a definition section, and I don't know if mine got inadvertently deleted or if the one that we copied off of had it deleted, but whatever that typical template is, we'll just follow the same format.
Yep.
And if this is the only definition we have, then maybe we'll just stick it into the.
Right, that's what I was thinking. If you wouldn't want to go to the extent of a definition section if you only have one.
Yeah.
I'm sure we're going to have more than one.
Yeah. Well, I know that definition sections are kind of crazy, but when you really need them, boy, it's nice to have them.
Yeah. Well, in this case, it certainly would probably be helpful, especially because
Right.
this is all.
Yep.
In fact, we probably should define what a UAS system.
I was just thinking of that. I thought the first thing you'd want to put in it is UAS, even though it says it at the top up there, but still.
Yeah, because Joe and I got into a little discussion on what constitutes a system, and because from his world, a system has a bit of a definition than my world, which probably is different definition than your world. So.
Well, the FAA treats it UAVs and UAS is a little different. So.
Yeah, I think a UAV is a part of a UAS.
That is correct. Yep. Yeah, the UAS is the full deal.
Actually, on that note, if the FAA has a definition for UAS, we probably should be going with that definition
Yep.
just to
Yeah,
minimize
that'd
any.
be really good.
So if someone could grab that, go ahead.
I just wanted to let you know some of the hurdles I ran into with these definitions with UAS and ground control station. Is I was running into some procurement issues with our CIO, our folks that manage our computers and software. The FAA definition is, as a UAS, includes the ground control station. So the tablets that we procure are considered part of the aircraft and not a separate entity. I'm not sure what the state of Montana's definition or control over computer stuff is, but that's going to be a conversation in the future, I'm sure, just preparing you for that.
Okay, good point.
Yeah, and I would, in my world, I would see that as part of the system as well. So the tablets, anything that are part of, what is it that we're trying to protect? So it's the aircraft plus the tablet plus, all the things that control it. So
Yeah.
I'd agree.
And to one comment you made there, Shane, I don't think Montana has that defined. That's what we're doing here. So, so that'd be a good conversation.
Okay, yeah, it's just the folks that control of all of our computers and software and updates and such. It was just kind of a clunky way to have them be involved, and they wanted to be. So it's a bigger problem that we have than I'm sure you guys would. I just wanted to let you know that it could be a hurdle in the future.
Yeah, I think we have that defined for the state of Montana within our risk management framework of identification of what a system is, an information system, which something that stores, transmits, and processes data.
Yeah. Okay. So Joe, maybe you can grab us the state's definition on an IT system, and maybe Steve or Jen, you want to grab us the FAA definition or point us to that. I've seen it before in the documents, but I'm sure you guys get there faster than me.
You can put it in your notes. Part 107.3 is the definition sections for the Part 107. But I don't see UAV there. I think UAV is just it's kind of a broad. That's a lot. It's used a lot, but it's not in the definition section. And also, there's another thing you might run into, and I don't know if it's important. Is there's such a thing as an SUAS, which is a small UAS, and so that's they in some documents you'll see that also used. But the definition section is really just pretty limited in Part 107, and you got the VO, which is the visual observer, and the PIC, pilot in command, and those kind. I don't know if those are necessary to put in these definitions, but for somebody that's maybe in an agency that's just trying to get something going, I guess these are going to be terms that they're going to run into and might want to be aware of. So,
yeah. And maybe not so much this document, but the other one for the oversight and operations.
yeah.
Work there, we may just refer to Part 107, Section 3.
Yeah.
Ray, do you want me to send you that definition, or is there a place that I can put that in here? Or
yeah, you could post it as a comment right here just for our reference.
Okay. Yes.
If you want. I think
I'll
what
do
we'll
that.
end up doing is we'll probably line out closer with the FAA definition and just make sure that we don't have a conflict with the state's IT definition. We have to follow the FAA guidelines for these things, so that's going to be the standard. But it's just, if we're not in conflict with the state, then great. If the state's in conflict, then we'll probably take that discussion to SITSD. But
it shouldn't be in conflict if FAA, if federal, right? So they'd be using NIST as definition, and so that's what we use. So we should be on the same page. I'd be surprised, but
I would.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other discussion around the cost benefit analysis to a program? The potential change of the $5,000, we'll see how that flies.
So Craig, this is Paul. Just a quick clarifying question. So as I look at it here, you have for new UAS programs, there's a recommendation that a full case analysis be done. So somebody like DOC that's looking about having a program at some point, they would need to do a full business case analysis, not just the cost benefit analysis. Is that the way I'm reading that correctly?
Yeah, as I was playing with this, I kind of was, okay, do we have to define what a full business case is versus a cost benefit? Not wanting to carry this too extensively. We had a great sample provided by Mike and at MDT. The executive order was for the cost benefit analysis. So that to me is the minimum standard. You should at least do that. And I think where we put here is a full business case analysis is recommended, that we back off from making a requirement, because then we'd really have to define what that is. But if we want to change that wording just to clear up confusion, in some ways what we're starting to do is kind of muddle the waters of what's the extent of a cost benefit versus a full business case. And I don't mind pointing people in the directions, but I don't want to get into having to define the definitions and scope and pieces of both those things if we can not get in too far into the weeds.
And I think that would be, no, I think that would be helpful, because as I read this, I could see our agency say, well, if it's recommended, we ought to be doing it, and to point us in a direction at least where they could find the difference between the two.
So
Without having.
What are you recommending?
Well, I'm just, again, I think if we're going to recommend it, and again, not knowing the difference between I see the cost benefit analysis form that you have. Where can we find the full business case analysis? Because what I'm going to have is an associate warden that's going to start to fill this out and for the program, and he's going to need to know where to get it.
There's a lot of resources. If you have your IT procurement, or just your procurement person is trained with the State Procurement Bureau and they follow their guidelines, State Procurement Bureau lays a lot of that out. They've got an acquisition plan that outlines samples of business cases and things. So a lot of that could be done just leaning on current State Procurement Bureau resources.
That would be wonderful, I think.
They've got a whole guide that is out there, and then they've got acquisition plan sample, which you describe your whole product or your project, your trade-offs, risks, all of that. So that's what I was thinking. And then instead of developing it, we just say State Procurement Bureau has it.
Yep, that would be great. That way we know where to go to do it.
Yeah, and then we're not trying to recreate the wheel or potentially getting in conflict with State Procurement Bureau. So no,
And I think, excuse me, this is Mike. I guess I just want to be sure we're not prescriptive, saying you have to use this template or that template, that it's available as a resource. Because I when I read the audit, it says they require a cost benefit analysis, but I don't know that we want to be super prescriptive. I think we leave it to the judgment of the person making the investment, that they fulfill that requirement of having a cost benefit analysis done. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, and I think we're on the same page. I just wanted to be sure.
Yeah, no, I think what we do is we try to define, help people see, if you're going to do a full business case, here is a good resource of what that might look like, and point them, even a URL to the State Procurement Bureau website or something, where they can find those documents. And if we feel like we're getting too far into that, we can back off that too. Gordy, do you think you can find that link for us to throw in here? It'd be great if you could. All right, any other comments on the policy draft here or thoughts on how we can improve it? All right, hearing none, I'm going to suggest we move on to the MUAS plan discussion.
One question, Craig, not to focus all this time on definitions, but I mean, there's multiple sections here. Does there need to be, if you do this definition thing, list of definitions, should it be a section that all be its own part of the full document, so everything can point to it?
Yeah, it generally is in here. I thought it comes first above the
Oh,
actual, but
okay.
otherwise they'll be down here. I see that we have, somehow I got, oh, that's section 3, A, B, and C, so there's gonna be some formatting there, because then we get into A,
Oh, I see. Okay.
the executive orders, C policy, so I put a placeholder in here saying.
Right. Okay. Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Thanks.
There's guidelines and standards. I'm not sure if we have those, although maybe we reference part 107 and stuff there. That might be where we do that. And add it there at the bottom. So this section at the end tends to be the reference materials for the stuff above of here's where we're getting it from, or here's where you can go to find more.
That looks good.
All right. I'm gonna stop that one and jump over to the other one. I see some, oh, we got some chats here. Gordy got some notes in there, so I'll have to grab those. Okay, so for the next section of discussion, let me bring up the other document here. I didn't see anyone had touched this document yet since our last call for the centralization of and oversight. We had some discussion last week. I believe we don't have Butch here on the call, do we?
Yeah, I'm here, Craig.
Oh, you are here. Hey, Butch. All right. So there was a little bit of a question on, or what, a discussion. Let me bring it up here and then get this thing shared on the central oversight organization. So what we've done, I believe the sub, I guess we'll call it subcommittee, sub-council group, the work group, did it with, make sure I'm getting the right document here. Okay, centralization policy. Folks see that?
Yep, that's it.
All right, so what we did was in the, where's the section on, I think D, coordination, cooperation, communication, we kind of filled in with MDT placeholders. We had a little discussion. So we looked at the audit, and the audit had, if I recall, 2 states that had MDT, no, one state had MDT, 3 states had MDT. 1 state had a Department of Justice managing it. 1 state had it's like a procurement office or something like that managing their UAS systems. So those transportation is a common one out of 5 states the audit looked at for this. Department of Justice was another, and the thought was if we're going to have people actually tracking pilot licensing and all, that is similar to Department of Justice type functions. And so there was some discussion of should it be looked at for that department as well as a possible home for this, or do we want to stick with the Department of Transportation? Just that UAVs or UASs for systems and such, that we're really not transporting such unless we're delivering packages, I suppose. But thoughts on that? And did people get a chance to look at this document yet? I know there's a number of people that weren't on the call, so maybe folks want more time to look into this before we get into fleshing it out too much.
Craig, I think we'd be fine with MDT managing that.
Well, let me, and I missed,
but so, you know, go ahead,
sorry.
Steve. Steve, were you starting?
Go ahead.
Oh, Mike.
Yeah, somebody else.
I'll go. This is Mike. So sorry, I missed last week. I had a conflict. I have had conversations with our chief engineer and our aeronautics division administrator, and I know there's a willingness to serve in that capacity. We just internally need to meet to figure out who it would be and how then that fits in with our own similar kind of coordination that needs to be defined at MDT. We have multiple divisions using UASs, and it's expanding rapidly. So we're kind of in a same situation as the enterprise is, getting a handle on things internally. So I think we would be in a position to fulfill that. I just need to have a conversation with those two and probably our deputy director level to be sure everybody's aware of the commitment and what it takes to fulfill it. So if that's something, you know, I'm kind of in the middle here. This is this council making a recommendation, and I feel like I need to have a conversation with some others here at MDT before I say we're all in. Is that fair?
Oh, yeah. I think from what we discussed before, the council would probably put in with a recommendation that there needs to be some type of identification and provision of some resources to help support this. But as you know, that piece can sometimes get dropped through a legislative process. And so then you're left with the responsibility without, you know, and whatever resources you have on hand, which is always the hesitation of agencies on taking on something new, because we've been stripped pretty tight of resources for a number of years. And so it's a big consideration, and certainly one that, you know, the agency director should be involved in for the program and for the state. So absolutely.
Well, and just to follow up a little bit, I did talk to Tim Conway, who runs our aeronautics division, and we do have a system that manages all of our pilot and aircraft registration functions, and we're in the process of making some updates and changes to it, rewriting parts of it. So the time is right if we're going to want to include some of the UAS specific requirements in a system to be able to track it. And it makes sense since the core functionality is similar, if not the same.
Yeah. Okay. Steve, were you going to say something too?
No. Well, I'll just throw in what I've thrown in before, is if I don't have a sense of if there's any issues with, if all these agencies, most of them are cabinet agencies, but the Department of Justice is a different deal because that's under an elected official. And I didn't know if everything is okay by having, you know, the AG's organization report to a cabinet level position. I mean, I don't know the politics that could come up on that, but that's the only thing I kind of think about.
Yeah, no, that was on my mind this week too. After last week's discussion, was like, you know, that may or may not be advisable. How's this going to play out? You know, I think in large part, this type of a program, and one of the reasons that I was more willing to participate, is that it should be fairly apolitical. You know, this is benefit to the citizens of Montana and is not really party affiliated, and so it doesn't really matter. But for an operational and structure of efficiency and moving forward, what makes sense, the Department of Justice is definitely vested in this type of technology. We talked about earlier with that, you know, with the bill that we passed last session with using them for auto incidents, and I'm sure they have other uses they've been using, and have other similar, in a sense, remote sensing devices, right? You know, a policeman's body cam is a remote sensing device that collects imagery much like a drone. It's just on the ground. So how much does that apply? And they do driver's licensing, and this is requiring pilot licensing.
You know,
so
if it was framed from the beginning, it says, look, this isn't this document, and what's being accomplished here is not, it's really the request of of a legislative committee, and it's not for the purpose of setting up an approval system so that DOJ and DNRC and all the rest are going to get approval and have to, essentially look at this as some sort of oversight. That it's basically a way to create some organization that will, like you say, benefit the citizens and satisfy the expectations of the legislators, so that there is some coordination but that's what it's limited to. So I think if it's framed that way, as long as everybody, they can get everybody on the same page, then, we're not saying all of a sudden that DOJ has to march to the drumbeat of some other agency. I mean, that's not what it's about.
Yeah, we certainly don't want to create encumbrances there that are unnecessary. So if MDT is willing to continue to look at this from where they're developed, that works great.
Right.
They also have strong ties in with the federal oversight in a lot of their programs, so that's nothing different for them. They've got a lot of pilots already, so they're used to that as well. So they're probably well established to kind of handle that.
Yeah.
So for everyone else that wasn't here, we just talked about the FAA compliance and really leaving this document recommendation pretty lean, that programs need to follow FAA regulations and just point to the FAA regulations and not try to recreate that, which seemed to work well for folks. The training piece, we talked about some. We haven't fully defined it, but a suggestion that in addition, state employees should need to also be, obviously certified with the FAA as a pilot's license, but a practical flight review for the state, and maybe a certain number of hours that they fly a UAV each year, and reporting of that, or recording of the hours that they are logging on that. And so, Jen, you guys do this with the university and kind of have a program set up in place. And I think, was that what this link was kind of outlining that policy that you guys have?
No, that link was actually just this question about insurance requirements. Like, I found the
right.
city of Missoula had something, but this is still, I think, an open question about insurance and what would be required as a state agency.
Yes,
For a contractor.
Right. I forgot about that discussion. We got into quite a bit of discussion. Yeah, so, and not to go down that trail again too far here, unless have more information. I have not gained any more information on the insurance outline. Did anybody else talk to risk management tort? Joe, are you going to do that or no?
Sorry, I was unmuting myself. Yes, I was supposed to talk to risk management and tort defense on that, and I have not had a chance to do that. I'm sorry.
Okay, so that's it'll still be on your action item list, and we'll come back to that one when we, if we can get more from them, that'd be great.
Okay, will do.
And as far as the flight amount of flights, Mike, does MDT require a certain number of hours from your UAV pilots that you guys track or something like that?
I can't answer that, Craig. I don't know, but I can find out.
It seemed like a good recommendation to have something like that, to make sure that the folks we have been practiced, have been reviewed and approved by the state to be those pilots in accordance with the FAA rules and such, and that we're doing due diligence to. Yeah, I think to me it gives a good transparency of, we want to make sure we're keeping citizens safe as we fly these things, and so here's how we're making sure that people are staying sharp with their skills. Fleshing that out a little bit would be fabulous. I think it's a good path to go down.
Yeah, I know we're following all of the FAA rules and state statutes. We're very aware of those and sticking to them. It's a pretty well established program, a small program. Our concern is the rapid growth of it needs to have coordination, so we're all marching to the same drum. So
yeah. And Jen, you'd shared that you guys, the students or anyone that's going to be part of your program and operating these have to do a certain number of hours of practice and be approved, certified by the university, something like that, right?
Yes, yes, that's true. And then we have them do a flight review basically where we confirm that they're ready to fly and capable of flying and being safe.
Each year?
No, so what we keep track of, no, because actually what we've had is it's a really limited set of pilots that go from year to year. So, or that are maintaining their qualifications year to year and even using the UAS. So it's those pilots, just by the fact that they're flying so often, maintain their currency. Although through one of our COAs, we do have the stipulation that you have to have 3 takeoff and landings every 90 days. So that's in place. But with students, it's been, particularly with students, it's regularly, they get trained, they do maybe one project, and then they graduate and they're gone. So we haven't really had a big need to, it's a small group we're following, is what I'd say annually.
Yeah. Do they have a certain number of hours they have to fly each year or no?
No, they don't have a certain number. If they're flying under the codes, it has to be 3 takeoff and landings every 90 days. But our pilots that are flying year to year are flying quite a bit. So we haven't set a minimum. We haven't felt that we needed to.
Okay. Well, and if the FAA has some of that defined, maybe we just point to that here as well.
They don't for UAS. So although in the COAs, that follows the manned aircraft standards of 3 takeoff and landings every 90 days, at least to have a passenger in your aircraft.
Okay. So it's part of the COA requirements to have the 3 takeoff and landings?
Yes.
Okay. And that might be a good recommendation that we put in here in general, or at least for agencies operating under that way. But for Part 107, is there any minimum number of hours of practices or takeoffs or?
Not for 107.
Okay.
And the document that the Forest Service just came out with that Shane helped put together, actually they have the requirement for their pilots to have 3 takeoff and landings every 90 days as well. So they're following FAA, typical FAA standards.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. So if the Forest Service has done that and the FAA kind of puts that in there, that seems like a good track to follow for the state. I think it would be good to have something in there showing some kind of requirement of that to just assure everyone that we don't just hand someone controls and let them go fly over people or something. That no, you have to meet all these things and you have to show that you're proficient at operating this.
Sounds good.
And it might even be required by our insurance too. I don't know, but that sounds like if we match what they're doing, that would probably be good. Anything else besides the 3 takeoffs and landings?
No. I mean, this isn't in our statutes, but we regularly are doing training. So, and part of that's just by the missions that we fly. We just need to stay sharp with our skills. So as the group of pilots that, again, is kind of small, we tend to get together, particularly during the flight months from spring to fall, where we're flying monthly, at least as a group, and practicing maneuvers. I don't think I would recommend that though, to put something like that on there. Because I think it depends on your program to some extent, how often you should meet up.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So if we want to put something in there, if you have any language to point to or examples you could give us, that'd be great, outside of what you already have. So. Transfer ownership, that was pretty simple. That's just another piece of state property. So we just reference that. Interagency coordination, we've already been chatting about. We got a few minutes here. Section on citizen interaction and data security. I wanted to start a little discussion for the objective recommended guidance on state agency use of a UAS over private property. Any thoughts on initial thoughts for the council on what the recommendation should be for agencies that find a need to or would like to fly over private property?
I don't we can't regulate over anything according to the FAA. It would only
Okay.
have to be where the takeoff point is, that we couldn't take off or land without permission from a private property owner if we're standing on their property. But if we're not on their property, the FAA, and I got this in writing in an email about a property dispute, they said they have no regulation to a UAS flying over someone's property.
The only thing that you once again point back to is the Part 107, which says you can't fly over anybody that's standing on that property. So
Right.
that would probably be the only restriction. I mean, we all know that the state legislature last session or so tried to restrict that. They wanted easements ahead of time for you to fly over somebody's property, and that just isn't it. And you gotta also too that you couldn't put in there that there's a limitation as to the altitude AGL over somebody's property. I mean, but there's a safety issue that they need to stay away from people, so they shouldn't be flying over somebody's head at 20 feet off the ground.
Right.
I don't know if you'd even put that in there, but it is, like Jen says, it's an issue of that you can't take off from their property, but you can fly over the property, and that's kind of always, I don't know how the Forest Service controls it, and that they've prohibited flights in the wilderness areas and such, because that is airspace. And all I can think of is the Forest Service is some sort of a MOU or a mutual agreement with the FAA, that the FAA has, I guess, put that on their sectionals, and which gives some restrictions that prohibit flying above Forest Service land and commercially and without a permit. Now, weirdness is that you can fly in the forest, normal Forest Service land, non-commercially without any permit or any restrictions. But the minute you want to do something commercially, then you need that permit. So, but I don't know anybody that could fly in the Forest Service and not have to take off from a Forest Service road. You know, I mean, you're just not going to start down in the Missoula Valley and fly all the way to the forest. And
Right.
so
Well,
that's where they have some control, I guess.
The regulation, yeah, even over congested areas, is in the FAA law for manned aircraft, but that is not, there's nothing about that in the UAS regulations.
Yeah.
So at least what I got from our FISDO out of Helena is that we cannot, because we had this issue about being on campus. We cannot stop people if they're not on campus property. We cannot stop them from flying over campus because they're in the airspace and it's not our purview. We can't regulate it.
And FAA regulates the airspace.
Yes, from above every blade of grass is what I was told.
And I guess where this takes this discussion is not all campuses understand that. And I'll point it directly at MSU Bozeman. They have some pretty strict regulations. There's no drones by students or anybody flying in the airspace above the MSU campus. And I don't agree with it, and I don't think it's right, but they've somehow got that rule. You go to the other campuses and it's not an issue. And but somehow MSU has got it in their rules. So, but the Part 107 is the controlling document, and you know, that's how, and you can't fly at night. The other thing too is if there's any campuses or any areas within a city that are close to the controlled airspace of an airport that's in the city, then that's, you know, it's going to have a great effect. Example is Helena. I mean, you got Fort Harrison and you got the Helena Airport, and they come close to colliding with their controlled airspace. And I don't know if the document needs to even mention land sea. I mean, that's how you can get your waivers to fly in some of the areas that are controlled, but at least you can fly above 0 AGL. So I don't know. I mean, still, if you point everybody back to the FAA rules, like we've been talking, you don't have to detail any of that in this document.
Yeah, I think it's something we're going to have to chat a bit about. Certainly pointing back to FAA's stance on regulating all airspace is a baseline that obviously we're not going to be able to get around or should try to. In the executive order, they are looking for some guidance on state agency use of a UAS over private property. And so the question is, I guess, twofold based on what Jen was saying. And one, should the state be adding a more restrictive requirement around flying over private property? And then two, legally, can they require that if FAA has full jurisdiction over it? This, I'm sure, is going to be a question that comes at us from legislators. So it may be that, I know for DNRC, we do try to get landowner permission. And so maybe we'll end up putting something in saying that such operations should make a reasonable attempt to gain landowner permission before flying or something. I don't.
Well, you've got a very special situation, Cray, with the state, because, and I think it's doable. And that is, if I were giving somebody the use of my aircraft and I was renting it to them, or they worked for me or whatever, I can lay down the law. I can say, you're not going to fly over somebody's property without knocking on their door and asking permission, because you've got my logo on your shirt and logo on the car, and I don't want any problems. And the state, you own the equipment and you are charging them with responsible use of the equipment. And if we set up a policy that says, you know, that you need to obtain landowner permission, they can say, well, I don't need it because the FAA doesn't require it. And he says, well, no, we know that. You're working for us and you're going to utilize the equipment as we tell you to utilize it. And now the problem you have is that you have to get buy-in from DOJ and from all these agencies, because some of the agencies may say, well, no, we're going to operate solely under FAA and we don't care if they fly over private property. So somehow, you know, you have to get buy-in. But the bottom line is the state owns equipment. The state is cutting the paychecks for the people flying the equipment. And if the contractor is contracting with the state and with their own equipment, they're doing it under the rules of the contract that they agreed to. And so you have opportunity at that point of saying that this is how your operation is going to be conducted. And I think that's perfectly appropriate, because that sets up a framework of real courtesy to landowners and takes away that, I mean, we talk about privacy, and if they find out that says, hey, you know, they're just going to start charging across my property with a drone and I got nothing to say about it, and they can't pass a law against it, there's going to be a rebellion. But if you go at it and says, look, this is how you're going to conduct your operation under state authority, because it's our equipment and you work for us, this is how you're going to operate it. So then I think you have I think it's perfectly appropriate myself.
For the university, we require that they have permission to fly over any private property.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm curious about DOJ or even the counties, you know, how are they, if they're in an emergency situation where they need to access an area and they don't have time to get permission, there's got to be some exemption in there, I would think.
Right, this is Butch. There is an exemption. It's called exigent circumstances. If you can establish that, you don't need a warrant to go over the property. There's 3 ways we do it. You guys have been talking about 2 of them. The third way, well, 1 would be probably a written consent, 2 would be exigent circumstances, and 3 would be by warrant. So that's how we would handle every one of them, because what happens to us is if we're in a criminal case, we could be running into evidence that we need for that case, and to keep that evidence legally, we need to have, you know, one of those 3 factors at play. And the other thing is with a search and rescue operation, if we happen to get called to use our device for that, then that would be an exigent circumstance that we could easily justify in a legal setting. So that's how we handle all those.
The only kicker that comes in on this is, like, I was doing a job last week and it was east of Bozeman, not that far from Bozeman, and I didn't have any concerns about flying. And all of a sudden my equipment showed me that there's a TFR over the top of the Bridger Range till the middle of November because of the remnants of the fire. And I had no idea that existed until my stuff popped up. So now you have a situation where maybe the state thinks that they're going to do some sort of survey up Bridger Canyon today. They're going to find out that they can't. So they have to adhere once again to the FAA regulations, to the sectional charts, to the TFRs, to everything that could complicate the matter. But again, you just tell your pilots that the overriding airspace rules are the FAA, and then you have your own list, I think. But I agree with, you know, what DOJ and the rest would have to deal with. So.
Yeah, Craig, I have one comment. So I agree with all that's been said about the FAA requirements for flyovers. But then going back to the data security, once that's brought back into a state system, you know, that it would just follow our state security policy that's already in place for securing that information, that data itself, once they bring that back.
Yeah, and we'll get into that conversation once we get down to the data that's collected over this. So we're about out of time here. So what I just wanted to do is point people to what I'm looking at here is in the council objectives document that's in the team site, section 2 under the plan. 1 was central oversight, which Wes, Jen, Steve, and anyone else in that work group helped flesh that out, was what we've been looking at. The second section that we haven't fleshed out yet is the citizen interaction, guidance on state agency use over private property, citizens' right to privacy, developing a process for handling data requests by others and for any citizen complaints. So that's where we're going to be headed with the discussion. So be thinking about that. I wanted to just get a few minutes talking about that to get people's wheels turning on that and from the different departments and what requirements they do and the practice. So we can start thinking about how we want to flesh out a recommendation for the state on that, because it's an area that's going to have to be addressed. And if the state addresses it well, it will benefit state agency use of these programs. If we don't handle it well, as Steve alluded, you know, there'll be a rebellion and someone may try to just ground all the devices for the state. So we want to serve the citizens well in this manner. And so please be thinking on that.
Well, the thing that I hate, let me just add one little caveat here. The goal set here, I think, is an excellent opportunity to indeed put something into a document that the state would adhere to prevent or help prevent legislators from showing up in Helena with this new idea on regulating drones when they really can't, and they don't understand why they can't. But if we have something that shows at least the state agencies have a policy, it doesn't, you know, include private individuals with their own, you know, contracts doing stuff, but at least the state agency isn't going to be faced with new legislation that contradicts what they're trying to accomplish. So, yeah.
And one of the things that, go ahead.
This Gordy, this section will be key to DOR to us. Let's say if I get a contractor to fly a rural area or a new subdivision, we're going to have internal policies, some kind of communication. This will be a huge issue if we don't handle it right. And we will get both positive and negative from legislators. I know that just getting regular imagery from a regular airplane not many years ago was black helicopters and all this weird stuff. So
yeah, it's important to me on the council here that we ensure a framework for transparency for citizens to know what's the state doing, when are they doing it, where are they doing it, and can I get a copy of that, so that they realize, look, we're not Big Brother spying. We're trying to serve citizens well through these processes, and we're trying to do it in a way that keeps citizens safe and secure and keeping all that above the table. So more to come on that. All right, so somebody else?
Oh, this is Shane. Sorry, I keep interrupting you guys. Just one thing to be concerned with is the PII stuff. Obviously, you guys are concerned about it, but breaking it down on what is it? You know, there's a difference between a state project where you're mapping a piece of land and a highway patrolman or a city fireman flying. whether it's emergency or non-emergency, I think that would be a way to clean it up. At least that's the way I did it in the past, because it's not going to be practical to notify any landowners along the Clark Fork and Missoula if they're looking for a search and rescue situation in the river. You know, the
Yeah,
intent
no,
is, there's two different things, I guess, and that might help you guys a little bit.
yeah. So Shane, if the Forest Service has anything written on that, that'd be helpful to get a copy of. And same thing, Butch, for your 3 definitions. That might help us out a little bit as we put our thoughts together. If you guys could add those to the team site, that'd be great. Okay. Sorry, folks, we're out of time. I do have another meeting I know I need to get to. I imagine others do too. But I have to ask any other public comment, which is pretty much Shane, from my understanding. Shane, thanks for your comments.
Yeah, you bet. But thanks for the invite.
Okay, and hearing nothing else, we'll continue on the discussions in the next meeting. I might have a conflict next week on the meeting, so stay tuned on that. If I do, then I may likely push it out to the following week and just ask folks to start fleshing out these documents. And please do try to get some stuff together for the council here so that we're able to continue to make forward progress on this, so that we are showing good diligence and not just looking at this once a week. So I know it's difficult. We all have lots going on. So appreciate everyone's efforts and work on this. Any other comments for the council?
Thanks, Gray.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.